I knew 22 steps. That was how many there were between the top of the staircase and the front door. My nanny had counted them with me once, both of us holding hands, both of us counting out loud, and I had remembered because I remembered numbers. I remembered most things. Minjun was the loud one and Sunwoo was the quiet one, and I was the one who remembered. I remembered that Appa smelled like cedar and cold air when he came home from trips. I remembered that he took his coffee without sugar because I had watched him once from the kitchen doorway when I was supposed to be in bed. I remembered the last time he had picked me up, really picked me up, not just transferred me from one place to another the way the staff did when I fell asleep somewhere inconvenient, and held me against his chest like I was something he was keeping safe. I was not sure he remembered that I remembered all of this. I walked down all 22 steps. I marched to the front door the way Minjun marched when he was being a dinosaur, which was the bravest kind of marching I knew. I slid my drawing under the door, the one with the orange tie, because orange was my best color and Appa deserved my best, and I pressed my mouth close to the gap at the bottom and I whispered, "Come back, Appa." Then I went back upstairs. I didn't know he was already on the other side. I didn't know that he stood there for a long time, in the cold, pressing my drawing against his coat like it was something precious. I found out later. Amanda told me, when I was older, when I was old enough to understand what it meant for a man like my father to stand frozen on his own doorstep, undone by a crayon drawing from a 3-year-old who colored all his ties orange because orange was her favorite and he was her favorite and she didn't know any other way to say it. This is that story. But it isn't really mine to tell. It's Amanda's.
Before we dive in, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because we do not play around with storytelling on this channel. Like this video if you're already emotional and we haven't even started yet. Drop a comment below, what's your sign? Because only certain kinds of people click on Mafia love stories at midnight. Let's get into it. His name was Seo Ji-hun. I knew this the way I knew things about storms before they arrived, from the way everyone around me behaved when his name came up. Mrs. O, who ran this household with the precision of a military operation and the emotional range of a very well-trained diplomat, would straighten by an extra half-inch. The kitchen staff would go just slightly quieter. Even the house itself seemed to hold its breath differently when someone mentioned him. I had been working for the Seo household for 8 months by the time he came back. 8 months of learning the layout of every room, every creak in every hallway, every preference of every small person in my care. I knew that Minjun liked his rice with exactly 3 pieces of egg and would notice immediately if you gave him 4. I knew that Sunwoo would not eat anything green unless it was shaped like something interesting. I knew that Yuna, my Yuna, with her orange crayons and her careful eyes, drew her father a new picture every single week and stacked them in a shoebox under her bed like letters she didn't know how to send. What I didn't know was the man himself. I knew his reputation. Mrs. O had briefed me before my first day with the detached efficiency of someone reading a weather report. Mr. Seo runs several companies. He travels frequently. He is a private man. Discretion is paramount in this household, she hadn't said. He runs the most powerful underground syndicate in Seoul. She hadn't needed to. You didn't get a house this big, this quiet, this carefully staffed, by running restaurant chains. On paper he was a CEO. Off paper he was the reason certain politicians in this city slept with one eye open. The ad that brought me here had read, experienced childcare professional needed. Triplets, age 3. Discretion required. Competitive compensation. What it had not said was, the children have not been held by their father in 4 months. They ask about him every day. They sleep with a framed photograph of their mother because nobody had the heart to move it. You will fall in love with them in approximately 48 hours and that will be your problem. I was Ghanaian. From Accra, the part of Accra where your aunties fed you whether you were hungry or not, and your mother's voice could be heard from 3 houses down. I had trained as a pediatric nurse, worked 5 years in a children's hospital, and then at 28 followed a work opportunity to Seoul that had turned into a whole life I hadn't exactly planned. I had fallen in love with those 3 children in 36 hours. I liked to think I was efficient. The night he came back, I was sitting on the floor of Yuna's room. She had fallen asleep holding my hand. This was not unusual. Yuna collected touch the way other children collected toys, quietly and with great seriousness, and I hadn't wanted to wake her by pulling away. So there I was, back against her toddler bed, in the warm dark of a child's room after bedtime, singing low. An old song. My mother's song, technically, a Ghanaian lullaby I had half memorized in childhood, the words sometimes dissolving into sounds that weren't quite words anymore but that had always worked on small ears. It wasn't a performance. It was just singing. The kind you do when nobody's listening. I didn't hear the footsteps. I heard the floorboard. The particular third board from the doorway that I had learned, through 8 months of nighttime checks, to step over. I turned. And I want to be very honest with you right now, because I believe in honesty. I was not prepared. Mrs. O had shown me photographs. I had studied them with the professional thoroughness of someone trying to recognize a client on arrival. I had thought, yes, all right, he's handsome, that's fine. I am a grown woman and a medical professional, and handsome men are not a disruption to my day. The photographs had lied. They had not included the way he filled a doorway, not through size exactly, though he wasn't small, but through something else entirely, some quality of presence that made the space around him reorganize itself. They had not included the jaw, or the way he was holding his suit jacket open like he'd loosened it in the car and hadn't bothered to fix it, or the fact that his eyes, fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel like I was a document he was speed reading, were the color of very deep water in very low light. They also had not included the crayon drawing. He was holding it against the side of his leg with just slightly too much care. A child's drawing, clearly. Orange. And something about the way he was holding it, like it was fragile, like it mattered, like he wasn't ready to put it down yet, told me more about Seo Ji-hun in 3 seconds than 8 months of household whispers had managed. I carefully unthreaded my hand from Yuna's. I rose from the floor without a sound, a skill developed entirely out of necessity, because these 3 children were the lightest sleepers I had ever encountered, and stepped into the hallway, pulling the door to behind me. And there I was. Face to face with him for the first time. I will note, for the record, that I was wearing my second best cardigan and had absolutely not prepared for this moment in any way. You must be Mr. Seo, I said, quietly, because there were sleeping children inches away and also because I needed a second to arrange my face into something professional. He looked at me. And you're the one who sings to my daughter. Not a question. Not warm exactly, but not cold either, not the specific cold I had been quietly warned about. Something in between. Like a man who had been caught off guard by something and was deciding, very carefully, what to do about it. Amanda Osei, I said. And then, because I was a professional and this was my job, the children are all asleep. Minjun had some trouble going down. He wanted to tell me every single thing he knows about dinosaurs, which is apparently everything, but he's out now. Sunwoo fell asleep at dinner, which I know sounds alarming, but I promise you his color was fine and I checked his temperature twice. And Yuna? I caught myself. He was still watching me. There was something happening in his jaw. Just slightly. Yuna, he said quietly, made me a drawing. I looked at the paper in his hand. Then I looked back at him. She drew you one last week too, I said carefully. And the week before that. I paused. She runs out of orange crayon fastest. She always colors your tie orange. She thinks that's what color your ties are. Something moved across his face. Just a fraction. Just enough for me to see it before it disappeared. My ties aren't orange. I know. I tilted my head slightly. But she's 3, and the orange crayon is her favorite. So. I held his gaze. You're her favorite too, Mr. CO? In case that wasn't clear. The hallway went very quiet. He looked down at the drawing. Back up at me. His face closed again, a door swinging shut, deliberate, practiced, but not before I saw, just briefly, what was living behind it. I recognized it. I had spent 8 months living alongside the shape of it, learning its edges in 3 small faces that missed their mother and didn't fully understand why she wasn't coming back. Grief, I knew. Grief wearing a very expensive suit. Good night, Ms. Osei, he said. He walked away down the hallway. I stood there and watched the big house swallow him back up. Then I pressed my back against Yuna's door, looked up at the ceiling, and whispered to absolutely nobody. Lord have mercy. Okay, wait, are you feeling this already? Because I said what I said, the orange tie detail? That little girl and her orange crayon? I cannot. Drop a comment right now telling me if you're team he stays or team let's see how long it takes him to mess this up. Don't forget to like this video, it helps the channel more than you know, and share this with a friend who needs a good story tonight. He stayed. Nobody announced it. No conversation, no schedule change, no formal notification passed through Mrs. O's extremely efficient channels. He just didn't leave the next morning. Or the morning after that. I noticed it the way I noticed most things in this house, quietly, from a careful distance, while pretending to be entirely focused on something else. The children found him at breakfast on day 2. I was in the kitchen with Mrs. O, discussing the week's grocery order with the focused energy of someone who was absolutely not listening for footsteps in the hallway, when I heard it. Minjun's voice. Minjun's voice had 2 volumes, loud and earthquake. I had never, in 8 months, heard a third option. So when it went very suddenly, very completely silent, I put down my coffee and went to see what had happened. All 3 of them were standing at the entrance to the dining room. Stock still. Staring. Their father was at the table. Coffee, the phone, the carefully neutral posture of a man trying very hard to look like he wasn't trying at all. He looked up. 3 pairs of wide dark eyes looked back. Nobody moved. I stayed in the doorway. This was not my moment. I was very aware it was not my moment. Then Sunwoo, my quiet one, my noticer, the child who said very little and missed absolutely nothing, walked forward. Climbed up the chair next to his father with the unhurried determination of someone who had decided a thing and was simply doing it now. Sat down. He looked at his father's phone. What game, he said. Mr. CO blinked. It's not a game. It's work. Sunwoo considered this with the gravity of a small judge deliberating a verdict. Boring, he concluded. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Minjun had recovered. Minjun's shock had a very short half-life, because Minjun had opinions to share and the universe owed him an audience at all times. Appa. Do you know about the T-Rex? Amanda says the T-Rex had tiny arms but its bite was so big, like, bigger than a car, and I told her you would know if that's true, so is it true? Mr. CO stared at his son with an expression I had never seen on his face in any photograph, something between overwhelmed and completely lost and, underneath both of those things, something that looked dangerously close to wonder. Yes, he said. It's true. See? Amanda. Appa said yes. I smiled into my hand. And then I looked at Yuna, and I stopped smiling. She hadn't moved from the doorway. She was watching her father with that expression, the careful one, the quietly hopeful one, the one that had been breaking my heart in installments since the first week I arrived and understood what it meant. Like she wanted something so badly she was afraid to want it out loud. I crouched down beside her. You okay, baby? She looked at me. Then at her father. Then she reached up, slowly, deliberately, and took my hand. And then, holding my hand, she walked toward the table. She stopped beside his chair. He put the phone down. She reached up with her free hand and touched his sleeve. Just lightly. Just the tips of her fingers against the fabric, like she was making sure he was solid. Like she needed to confirm he was real before she let herself believe it. "You came back," she said. Very quietly. The whole room went still. I could hear the coffee maker in the kitchen. I could hear my own heartbeat doing something it had no business doing on a Tuesday morning. His hand moved, careful, slow, the way you move towards something precious that you're afraid to startle, and covered hers. "I came back," he said. I looked away. Some moments don't need an audience. And also my eyes were doing something I was not going to acknowledge in this household, on this Tuesday morning, in front of my employer. I went back to the kitchen. I stood at the counter and breathed. Mrs. O, without looking up from her clipboard, passed me a tissue. I chose not to comment on that. Here's what I learned about Seo Ji-hun over the next 3 days, catalogued with the clinical precision of a woman who was absolutely not developing opinions about her employer. He was two different people, and the scene between them was visible if you knew where to look. Version 1, the phone calls behind closed doors, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to lower the temperature of the entire floor. The car that appeared at odd hours, men in dark suits who stood outside and never came in. The video call I accidentally half overheard. I was passing the study with a laundry basket. I was not loitering, where he said, very quietly and very finally, to someone on a screen, "I gave you until Thursday. It's Thursday." Then said nothing. Just waited, with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world because the other person certainly didn't, while the apologizing started on the other end. I kept walking. Very quickly. Version 2 was the one I watched from the couch that same afternoon, folding laundry with extreme professionalism, while Seo Ji-hun, head of the Chonggang network, the reason certain politicians in this city slept with one eye open, sat cross-legged on the living room floor attempting to assemble a toy dinosaur skeleton. Min-jun had presented it to him with the solemnity of a scientific commission. Mr. Seo had accepted it with equal gravity. He'd been at it for 20 minutes. Instructions in hand. Reading them with the same focused intensity he had probably given to hostile business acquisitions. I watched him pick up the hip bone. I watched him hold it. I watched him hold it for 6 minutes. "The hip bone," I said helpfully, not looking up from the shirt I was folding, "goes before the tail." He didn't look up. "I know. You've been holding the hip bone for 6 minutes. He looked up at that. One eyebrow. Precise. Controlled. The kind of look that was probably, in other contexts, a career-ending event. On me, sitting on his couch folding his children's tiny socks, it landed differently. Something I was filing under not my problem and moving firmly on from. "Would you like help?" I asked pleasantly. "No." I went back to folding. 30 seconds passed. Ms. O say. Where does the hip bone go?" I pressed my lips together very carefully. Set down the shirt. Came and sat beside him on the floor, at a proper, professional, entirely appropriate distance, and pointed. "There." Then the tailpiece clicks in from the left, not the right, because Min-jun lost the right attachment clip on day 1. "Don't ask." He looked at me sideways. Up close, the water-dark eyes were more unsettling than they'd been in the hallway. He smelled expensive and faintly like cedar, and I was making a firm point of noticing none of this. "You know this toy," he said. "I've built this particular dinosaur approximately 11 times. Min-jun likes to destroy it and start over. It's his process." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile exactly, more like the architecture of one. Like his face remembered how smiling worked but was being cautious about the commitment. "He's like his mother," he said. And then he went quiet. I didn't feel it. 8 months in this house had taught me a great deal about grief and the specific shape of the silence it needed. You didn't rush it. You didn't paper over it. You just sat with it and let it be what it was. "She liked to take things apart too," he said. "Not quite to me. almost to the dinosaur between us on the floor. Said she understood things better that way. Something pulled in my chest. Slow and aching. She sounds like she was something, I said quietly. She was everything, he said simply. Without drama. The way you state a fact so fundamental it doesn't need decoration. The living room held the quiet. Then he clicked the hip bone into place. The power went out on a Thursday night. Not a gentle flicker. A full, sudden, dramatic blackout, the kind that swallows a house whole in half a second and leaves you standing in the dark wondering what you did to deserve this. Seoul was having one of its aggressive spring storms, the kind that came in fast and loud and took the electricity with it like a parting gift. I was in the middle of washing dishes. The kitchen went black. From upstairs, 3 seconds of silence, and then the screaming started. Not crying. Screaming. All 3 of them, simultaneously, the specific high-pitched panic of toddlers who have decided that darkness is personal and targeted and deeply offensive. I was already moving before the second, grabbing the torch I kept in the second kitchen drawer because I had learned within my first month that this house needed emergency preparedness protocols, drying my hands on the way to the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I got to the hallway. He was already there. Ji-hoon was standing outside the children's door in the dark, torch in one hand, and he looked, for the first time since I'd met him, genuinely, completely lost. Like a man who had every skill in the world except this one. Like the screaming from behind that door was a language he desperately wanted to speak and couldn't find the words to. I didn't pause. I went straight past him, pushed the door open, and walked into the chaos. Hey. Hey, I'm here, I'm right here. Minjun launched himself at me from his bed like a small missile. I caught him, staggering slightly under the impact, and he buried his face in my neck and kept screaming directly into my collarbone which, respectfully, was not comfortable, but I held him anyway and kept moving. Sunwoo had rolled himself into the tightest possible ball at the corner of his bed, making that low, distressed sound I hated, like a small engine misfiring, like something in him had gotten stuck. And Yuna was standing in the middle of the room with both arms out. Not even crying. Just waiting. Just standing there in the dark with her arms out, waiting for someone to come, and her face in the torchlight was the kind of thing that made my chest do something complicated. I went for Yuna first because Minjun had grip and wasn't going anywhere regardless, and I had 2 arms, and Yuna was standing there in the middle of the room like a lighthouse signal. I pulled her in against my other side and looked across at Sunwoo. Sunwooya. I'm here. Come here, baby. He didn't move. Tighter, if anything. Then a second torchlight appeared in the doorway. I felt him before I saw him, that particular quality of presence reorganizing the air in the room. Ji-hoon walked in. He walked to Sunwoo's bed with the same focused deliberateness I'd watched him give the dinosaur skeleton, and he sat down on the edge of it. He didn't reach for his son immediately. He just sat there, in the dark, and said, quietly, all the boredom stripped entirely out of his voice. I'm here. Sunwoo uncurled. Fraction by fraction. Like something slowly deciding to trust. And then, like a small slow tide coming in, he moved across the bed and pressed himself against his father's arm. Ji-hoon put his arm around him. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. But something in the room shifted, the air redistributed itself, made space for something new. Something that felt tentative and enormous at the same time. We sat like that, all 5 of us in that dark room while Seoul's storm threw itself at the windows, until the screaming became crying, and the crying became sniffling, and the sniffling became the slow, heavy, even breathing of exhausted children. Minjun fell asleep first. He went the way he did everything, completely, dramatically, without half measures. One moment screaming, the next sprawled across my lap like a person without bones, mouth open, dinosaur print pajamas twisted sideways. I adjusted him carefully and didn't move. Yuna went next. She tucked herself against my side with the neat efficiency of a child who had decided this was where she was meant to be, curled one fist under her chin, and was gone. Sunwoo held on the longest. He had his head against his father's arm and he was fighting sleep the way children do when they're afraid that whatever good thing is currently happening will evaporate the moment they close their eyes. I watched him blink. Slower. Slower. Beside him, Ji-hoon sat completely still. He didn't shift. Didn't check his phone. Didn't reach reflexively for something to fill the silence the way I had noticed him do in every other quiet moment. He just sat there in the dark and let his son fall asleep against him like it was the only thing that mattered. When Sunwoo's breathing finally evened out, the room was quiet enough that I could hear the rain against the windows. I looked up. Ji-hoon was already looking at me. In the low torchlight, with 3 sleeping children between us and a storm pressing at the glass, his face had lost all of its armor. He just looked human. Tired. Like a man who had been carrying something extremely heavy and had put it down for the first time in a very long time and wasn't sure his arms remembered how to be empty. I looked back at him steadily. "You stayed," I said. Soft. No accusation in it. Just noticing. "Yes," he said. Like he was still working out what that meant. "Okay, I need to stop here for 1 second. Are you seeing this man?" He came through. He sat in the dark with his babies. I can't. I simply cannot. Comment below, what was your favorite moment so far? And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? This story is not going to tell itself without you. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's keep going. Morning arrived the way it always did in that house, with Min-jun. He woke at 6:43, noticed he was in a different position than he'd fallen asleep in, and immediately launched an investigation. By 7 he had deduced and announced, at full volume, the following: the lights were back on, Appa had stayed in their room all night, and Amanda had a squished face from sleeping sitting up against the wall. He was not wrong about any of it. I was in the kitchen nursing my coffee with the quiet desperation of a woman whose neck had been at a 30-degree angle for 6 hours, when Ji-hoon appeared in the doorway at 7:15. He'd changed suits. Of course he had. The man had apparently packed for a small military operation, an endless rotation of perfectly pressed suits, each one more unfair than the last. He looked put together and unreasonably presentable, and I was still in yesterday's cardigan with my locks escaping their tie on 3 sides and one of Min-jun's dinosaur stickers somehow on my sleeve. He looked at my coffee. "There's more," I said, pointing at the pot without looking up. "Mugs in the cabinet above the..." "This one?" "No, the second one." A pause. A cabinet opening. "That's mugs and children's cups." "Third one." Another pause. Why are there 14 spatulas in here?" "Mr. CO." I finally looked up. The cabinet. Directly above. The coffee maker. That one. Right there. He found it. Poured his coffee. Came and sat down at the kitchen island across from me with the careful arrangement of a man adapting to unfamiliar terrain, which in this case was a kitchen at 7 in the morning with a human woman who had not yet finished her first cup. We drank in silence. It was, surprisingly, not uncomfortable. "Your neck," he said, "is fine. You've tilted it to the left 4 times in the last minute." I blinked. I hadn't noticed that. "Occupational hazard," I said. "Of sitting on floors. Of working with children who are afraid of the dark." A silence. "All 3 of them," he said quietly. "All 3 of them." I wrapped both hands around my mug. "You know worst, Sunwoo second. Min-jun acts like he isn't, but he is." I paused. It started about 2 months after I arrived. Before that I stopped. I hadn't meant to go there. He looked at his coffee. Before that, they were with the previous caregiver. Yes. Who left? Yes. He didn't ask why. Good. Because I wasn't going to be the one to say that a rotating door of staff who none of the children had been able to trust had not been ideal for 3 grieving toddlers who needed someone to stay. "They don't like the dark," I said instead, "because they don't like being alone in the dark." There's a difference. With the right person in the room, Minjun treats a flashlight like an adventure. Sunwoo calms within a few minutes. And Yuna, I smiled, small and private, the way I always did when I thought about Yuna specifically. Yuna just needs someone to hold her hand. That's the whole thing. That's all it takes. He was quiet for a long time. You know them, he said. Not accusatory. More like, arriving somewhere. It's been 8 months, I said simply. Something worked in his jaw. He looked down at his coffee again. Then, tell me something about Sunwoo. Something specific. Something he stopped. Started again differently. Something I don't know. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me. His hands were around his mug. His shoulders had the kind of tension that was working very hard to present itself as no tension at all. I understood what he was actually saying. He collects sounds, I said. Not things, sounds. If something makes a noise he likes, he needs to hear it again. The coffee grinder. The way a certain toy squeaks. The sound of rain on the skylight in the upstairs bathroom. I paused. He'll sit under that skylight during storms for 20 minutes, just listening. Just completely still, just taking it in. Jihoon was very quiet. He got that from somewhere, I said carefully. That stillness. That listening. His mother, he said. I thought so. He didn't say anything else. Neither did I. But when he picked up his coffee again, his hands were a little less tight around the mug. The days that followed arranged themselves differently than the days before. He didn't disappear again. He also didn't transform overnight into someone who did fatherhood easily, and I wouldn't have trusted it if he had, because easy things weren't always real things, and these children had already had enough of things that didn't last. What he did was show up. Awkwardly. Imperfectly. In ways that I could see, every single time, cost him something. He tried to help with Minjun's bath. He flooded approximately 12% of the bathroom. I appeared in the doorway, took in the water spreading cheerfully across the tile, took in Minjun, who was absolutely delighted, this was the best night of his life, took in Jihoon, crouching there in his rolled-up dress shirt with the expression of a man confronting a physics problem he had not anticipated. I'll get the towels, I said. I had it. You had the concept of it, I said. That absolutely counts. He looked at me. The almost smile appeared. The architecture of one. I got the towels. He tried to read Sunwoo a bedtime story. I stayed to tidy the shelf, not watching, entirely not watching, and discovered, 3 pages in, that Sunwoo had already memorized this particular book and was quietly, patiently correcting his father every time he skipped a word. Which was impressive for a 3-year-old. Which was apparently also a lot, for a man who ran a criminal empire. The mouse says oh bother, Sunwoo said patiently. I said oh bother. You said oh well. Those are similar. They're not the same, Sunwoo said, with the gravity of someone who had genuine feelings about the integrity of literature. I straightened the same 3 books 4 times. Jihoon read it again. Correctly this time. Sunwoo leaned against his father's arm. I put the books down and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Get it together, Amanda. I found him on the rooftop terrace at 11:30 on a Wednesday night. I hadn't been looking for him. I'd come up because I couldn't sleep in the sky over Seoul after a clear day was one of my favorite things. The city lights spread out below like a second, less organized set of stars. I had my tea. I had my cardigan. I had planned for solitude and a few minutes of breathing air that didn't smell like children's shampoo. He was at the railing with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled, finishing a phone call. I heard his voice before I saw him properly, and I want to be clear, it was not the voice he used inside the house. It was not the voice that read bedtime stories or asked where the hip bone went or said I'm here in the dark to a frightened child. It was something else. Stripped down to its core.
Handle
Precise
it,
and
or there will
cold
be
and very,
consequences.
very
Handle
final.
it, or there will be
I
consequences.
said end it.
Handle it, or there will be
pause.
consequences.
I don't repeat myself, Director Lim. If the numbers aren't cleared by Monday, you won't need to worry about numbers anymore. Do you understand me? Another pause. Good. He ended the call and turned around. And found me standing at the terrace door. We looked at each other. I want to be clear about something. I had known what kind of house I was working in since the interview. Mrs. O had not said it outright, but she hadn't needed to. You read the room, you read the money, you read the specific quality of discretion that everyone in this household maintained, and you understood. I had chosen it anyway because the children needed me and I had needed them, and that equation had been enough. Hearing it and hearing it, though, were different things. Ji-hoon watched my face. I could see him doing it, reading me, the way he'd read me in the hallway that very first night, looking for something. Ms. Osei, he started. I was going to offer you tea, I said. If you've already got something. I don't. A beat. Tea would be, yes. I went back downstairs. I stood in the kitchen for a moment with my hands on the counter and breathed. Then I made 2 cups, put them on a tray, and went back up. I handed him one. We stood at the railing and looked at Seoul together and didn't talk about the phone call. The city hummed below us. Somewhere far off, a light was blinking red against the dark. I sipped my tea and felt the wind and let the silence be what it was, not uncomfortable, not loaded, just 2 people on a rooftop at midnight, drinking tea, watching a city that never fully went to sleep. After a while, he said, "Are you afraid of me?" I considered it the way I considered most things, honestly, without rushing toward an answer that would make either of us feel better than the truth warranted. "No," I said. "You should be." "Probably." I sipped my tea. I'm also not afraid of thunderstorms, even though one took out the power last week. And I'm not afraid of Minjun, even though he is essentially a natural disaster in pajamas. I glanced at him sideways. I've found that fear is less useful than paying attention. He looked at me. The city light caught the angle of his jaw. I looked back at Seoul. "You're strange, Ms. Osei," he said. "My mother says the same thing," I replied. "She means it as a compliment. I'll take yours the same way." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not the almost smile. Not the architecture of one. The actual thing. It was brief, half a second, maybe less, but it was real, and it changed his whole face in a way that I was completely, professionally, entirely not going to think about later when I was trying to sleep. "The children are lucky," he said quietly, after a moment. "To have someone who," he stopped. Came at it from a different angle. "You don't treat this like a job." "It isn't one," I said. "Not really?" "Not anymore." "Then what is it?" I looked at him then. Straight on, the way I'd looked at him that first night in the hallway, because I wasn't afraid of eye contact any more than I was afraid of storms. "It's them," I said simply. "They're just them. And I love them. That's all." The wind moved across the rooftop. He turned back to the city. His hands on the railing had loosened. I noticed because I noticed things, because I always noticed things, no longer gripped tight the way they'd been when I first came out. Something in him had settled. Not opened, maybe not ever fully open, but the wall had stepped back a little and given the air more room. "Good night, Mr. Seo," I said. "Good night, Ms. Osei." I went back downstairs. Walked to my room. Stood in the hallway for a moment and pressed the back of my hand against my cheek, which was warm. "Get it together, Amanda," I told myself firmly. From down the hall, very faintly, I heard him exhale. Long, slow. Like something he'd been holding for quite a while. I went to bed. I did not think about it. I thought about it. She arrived on a Friday afternoon in a car that cost more than most people's apartments. I knew who she was before anyone said a word. You didn't need an introduction. Madame Seo Yunja walked through the front door of that house the way she walked through every room she'd probably ever entered, like the space had been waiting for her specifically and was grateful for the honor. 71 years old, impeccably dressed, the kind of beauty that age had sharpened rather than softened. Pearls at her throat. Hair set perfectly. Eyes that moved around a room the way a general's eyes moved across a battlefield, cataloging, assessing, deciding. I was coming down the stairs with Yuna on my hip when those eyes found mine. She looked at me the way you looked at furniture you weren't sure about. Not rude. Not warm. Precise. You must be the African girl, she said. I smiled. The particular smile I had developed over 2 years in Korea for moments exactly like this one. Warm enough to be polite. Steady enough to say, I see exactly what you're doing and I am unbothered. Amanda Osei, I said. You must be the children's grandmother. They'll be so excited to see you. Yuna, completely unconcerned with the social dynamics happening over her head, leaned forward from my hip and said, Halmoni. Do you want to see my drawing? Something cracked in Madame Sio's face. Just briefly. The general's assessment dropped for half a second and something softer looked through, something that reminded me, unexpectedly, of her son. She reached out and touched Yuna's cheek with a gentleness that I filed away carefully. Show me, she said. I handed Yuna over. And then I went to find something else to do. Ji-hoon arrived home 2 hours later. I heard the car. I heard the front door. I heard the brief, muffled exchange in the sitting room where his mother had installed herself like she'd always lived there, 3 children orbiting her at varying speeds. I stayed in the kitchen and kept making dinner. He found me there. She's here, he said. I noticed, I said pleasantly, not turning around. A pause. Did she say something to you? She said several things to me. I kept my attention on the stove. Would you like me to list them, or shall we agree that she has opinions and move on? I heard him come further into the kitchen. Felt him stop on the other side of the island. What did she say? I turned then. Because he deserved a straight answer and I wasn't going to give it to the backsplash. She asked how much I was paid, I said. She asked about my references. She asked me, very politely, whether I found Seoul lonely, which I believe was a gentle invitation to consider going home. I paused. Then Minjun told her the entire plot of a dinosaur documentary at full volume and she got distracted. So I came in here. He looked at me for a moment. I'll speak to her, he said. You don't need to do that on my behalf. I'm not. His voice was even, clean, the way it got when something was decided. She's in my house. My rules apply. I looked at him. He meant it. He was not performing. And something in my chest did a small, inconvenient, unprofessional thing that I acknowledged and immediately set aside. The children's dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, I said, turning back to the stove. If you want to sit with them, now's a good time. A pause behind me. Then footsteps. Then the door. I let out a slow breath. Okay, I told the pot of rice, very quietly. Okay. Madame Seo stayed for the weekend. She was not, I would acknowledge privately, without love for the children. She brought them things, small, considered things that showed she paid real attention. A picture book about sounds for Sunwoo. A set of tiny dinosaur figurines for Minjun that left him genuinely speechless for 4 consecutive seconds, which was frankly a record I didn't think could be broken. A bracelet for Yuna with her name in tiny beads, which Yuna immediately needed me to clasp and then needed to show me from every single angle, which I viewed from every angle with the seriousness it deserved. I felt her watching me with the children. I didn't perform for it. I had decided long ago that performing for people's approval was a waste of everyone's time, including mine. I just did what I always did. I fed them, held them, listened to them, laughed with them. I sat on the floor with Minjun and built the dinosaur skeleton. I read Sunwoo his book and let him correct me in the places he'd memorized, nodding gravely at each correction like he was a peer reviewer, and I was grateful for the note. I braided Yuna's hair the way she liked it and let her choose the clips, which always took 18 minutes because the decision was serious and she knew it and I knew it and we both respected the process. I was coming out of the children's bathroom Saturday evening, drying my hands, when I found Madame Co standing in the hallway. "Sit with me," she said. Not a request. We sat in the small upstairs sitting room. Just the two of us. She poured tea like she was in her own home and I sat across from her and waited, because whatever this was, it needed to arrive in its own time. "You care for them genuinely," she said. "Yes," I said. "That's what concerns me." I waited. She stirred her tea. Her eyes on the cup, then up. "Women in your position sometimes develop attachments. To the household. To what the household represents." A pause. "My son is wealthy. He is grieving. He is isolated. He is, despite everything, a man. These are conditions that some people calculate." The word landed exactly where it was aimed. I set my cup down. Slowly. Deliberately. "I understand what you're suggesting," I said. My voice was very level. "And I understand why a mother would think it. But I want to be clear with you, Madame Co, because I think you're someone who prefers clarity over comfort." I met her eyes directly. "I am here for Minjun, Sunwoo, and Yuna. I was here before Mr. Co came home. I'll be here whether he's present or not. Whatever you think you're seeing, you're reading a story that isn't there." She looked at me for a long time. "You're very composed," she said. Not quite a compliment. Not quite, not one. "I'm Ghanaian," I said. "We're raised for exactly this." Something, very briefly, crossed her face that was almost like amusement. She said nothing else about it. I took my tea and held it and breathed. But I was not foolish enough to think it was over. The days after she left were different. Not with the children, with them, everything continued the way it always had. The beautiful, reliable chaos of three 3-year-olds who needed feeding and bathing and reading to and dancing with, and the specific kind of love that was mostly just showing up every single day without exception. With Jihun, though, something had tightened. I noticed it the way I noticed most things, quietly, without announcing it, turning it over in my mind during the small hours when the house was asleep and I had nothing to do but think. He was still present with the children. Still at breakfast. Still sitting with Sunwoo under the skylight when it rained, still holding Yuna's hand, still letting Minjun drag him into dinosaur discourse he only half understood. That hadn't changed. But the spaces between things, the rooftop conversations, the kitchen mornings, the floor-level moments with dinosaur bones between us, those had cooled. He was polite. Professional. He looked at me the way he'd looked at me in the very beginning, before we'd built anything in the in-between spaces. Assessed, where before he had simply looked. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself my business was the children and nothing else. I told myself this very firmly and with great conviction. I was not entirely convincing. It was Yuna who broke the silence, because Yuna broke most things that needed breaking, usually without knowing she was doing it, which was somehow the most effective method. Tuesday afternoon. The garden. The children running through the grass while I sat on the steps and let the spring air do something good for my head. I hadn't known Jihun was home. He appeared at the edge of the garden quietly, the way he did sometimes, and stood watching the children with the look I had learned to recognize, the one that meant he was giving himself permission to be present. I was watching the children too. I was very focused on the children. Yuna spotted me, abandoned whatever she'd been doing, and ran straight over. "Dance, Amanda. Amanda, dance. Baby, I'm sitting. Dance." I laughed. I always laughed. I let her pull me up. She had an extraordinary amount of grip for someone her size, and I did the thing I always did when she demanded it. I danced. Not with any elegance or concern for how I looked. I pulled her into my arms and spun, and she screamed with laughter, and Minjun immediately crashed into us, and Sunwoo drifted over with his hands up, and it became a whole thing, all three of them and me, turning in the garden, completely ridiculous, completely loud. I came to a stop. Facing Jihoon. He was watching me. Not the new version. Not the assessed, measured, cooled version. The other one. The rooftop version. The one that made the air feel like it had shifted composition. I set Yuna down. Smoothed my cardigan. Attempted to look like a person who had not just been spinning in a garden. He took a step toward me. And then Minjun, bless him, curse him, attached himself to Jihoon's leg with the full conviction of a child who had decided this was his moment. Appa. Appa, watch this. The moment broke apart like it had never been. Jihoon looked down at his son. Then briefly, just briefly, back at me. I turned away first. Okay. The almost moments are killing me. And we haven't even gotten to the betrayal yet. If you're feeling the tension, comment right now, orange crayon, so I know you've been here from the start. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and share this with somebody who deserves a good story. We're almost at the turning point and you do not want to miss it. Mrs. O came to my room on Thursday evening. A quiet knock. I opened the door and read her face in half a second, carefully, uncomfortably neutral, which on Mrs. O, who was professionally neutral at all times, meant something was wrong. Mr. CO would like to speak with you, she said. In the study. I closed my book. I had been in the study exactly once, to return a phone he'd left on the kitchen counter. It was his territory in a way the rest of the house wasn't. Books on 3 walls. A desk the size of a small country. The kind of room designed to establish, clearly and without apology, where authority in this house resided. He was standing at the window when I came in. He didn't sit. Didn't gesture to a chair. That told me everything I needed to know before he opened his mouth. I'm going to ask you something directly, he said. And I'd like a direct answer. I've never given you anything else, I said. He turned. In the warm study light, his face was very controlled. Too controlled, the particular control of someone managing something underneath the surface that they didn't want visible. My mother came to me this morning, he said. She expressed concerns. About your position in this household. About your relationship with the children. About whether your interest in this family is, he stopped. Reorganized. She believes you've formed attachments that are strategic. That you're aware of what this household represents financially, and that you're positioning yourself accordingly. The room was very quiet. I took stock of my own body the way my training had taught me, breathing even, hands still, eyes steady. I was not going to cry. I was not going to raise my voice. I was not going to hand him a version of this conversation that made his doubt easier to carry. Is that what you believe? I asked. Something moved across his face. I'm asking what's true. I know what you're asking. I kept my voice level. Warm and cool at the same time. But I'm asking what you believe. Because you've been in this house. You've seen me with your children. You've sat beside me on that floor and you've been on that rooftop and you've been, here, Jihoon. His name. First time I'd used it. We both heard it. So I'm not answering a question from your mother that she sent through you, I said. I'm asking if you believe it. He said nothing. That was the answer. I nodded. Once. Slowly. The way you nod when something confirms what you already knew and you were hoping you were wrong. Okay, I said quietly. I left the study. Went upstairs. Sat on the edge of my bed. 4 minutes. I gave myself 4 minutes. Then I got up and started to pack. I didn't make a scene of it. That wasn't who I was, and this family didn't deserve my mess on top of everything they were already carrying. I packed over 2 days, efficiently, quietly. I told the children I had to go visit a friend, which was true enough. I had someone across Seoul I could call. I let Yuna pick which of my hair clips she could keep. I built the dinosaur skeleton with Minjun one final time, letting him narrate every step with the authority of someone who had supervised this project many times. I sat with Sunwoo under the skylight for 27 minutes on a rainy Thursday afternoon, both of us saying nothing, which was exactly what he needed, and I knew it, and he knew I knew it. I said goodbye to Mrs. O, who pressed both my hands between hers and said nothing, because Mrs. O expressed the things that mattered by not trying to put them into words. I did not say goodbye to Jihoon. I left on a Saturday morning. 2 bags, one over each shoulder. The sky was the pale gray of early spring in Seoul, not quite cold, not quite warm, the city not yet decided. The car I'd called was waiting at the end of the driveway. I walked. I did not look back at the house. I had gotten 3 steps down the driveway when I heard the front door open. I kept walking. Amanda. I stopped. Not because I had to. Because my name and his voice, not Ms. Osei, not said with professional distance, just my name, plain and direct and like it cost him something, did something I couldn't override with sense or training or self-preservation. I turned around. He was standing in the doorway. No jacket. Shirt open at the collar. He looked like he hadn't slept and wasn't pretending otherwise, and his face had lost every last piece of its armor, and there he was, just him, just the man I'd watched put his arm around a frightened child in the dark, just the man who had pressed a crayon drawing against his chest on his own doorstep and stood there unable to breathe. I waited. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. The man who never repeated himself. Who ended phone calls with 5 words and made them land like verdicts. Standing in his own doorway, unable to find the ones he needed. I felt something pull in my chest, deep, aching, the specific grief of wanting to cross a distance and knowing that you shouldn't, that crossing it would make you into something you weren't, that he had to be the one to cross it or it wasn't worth crossing. I shook my head. Not angry. Worse than angry. Take care of them, I said. I got in the car. I looked straight ahead. I did not watch the house get smaller in the window, because I already knew what it looked like and I was not going to add that to the list of things I had to carry.